Right. So today we'll walk you through what Bahmni is, what the challenges we faced in migrating Bahmni, and how AI helped us do that. So to give folks who are not familiar with Bahmni a glimpse of what Bahmni is an healthcare management system, an EMR platform that is built almost 13 years ago and has been in use for almost 12 now. It is mostly focused for low resource settings and is right now being used in about 50 countries. Bahmni helps healthcare workers capture the details of patients as they walk into a clinic. Everything that your doctor wants to know about you is captured with Bahmni. Bahmni's front end was developed with Angular JS way back in 2013. The stack is now sunsetted. Google decided like they'll stop support for Angular JS. We don't have active support for it. And the backend for Bahmni is built at OpenMRS. OpenMRS is, like I said, is an EMR platform, foundational platform that on top of which Bahmni is built. So Bahmni's patient model, the data model, and the patient workflow is kind of aligned towards Bahmni. There is a tight coupling between Bahmni's OpenMRS data models and its specific implementation logic. Problems here is that, like I said, Angular is already sunsetted, and that is increasingly difficult for us to get security fixes, find new developers who understand this language, and get more community support. Bahmni is an open source software, so community is a key part of the process. And on the OpenMRS side, if you're familiar with the healthcare domain, there is an interoperability resource called FHIR, or Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resource. Back in 2013, when Bahmni was in its infancy, FHIR hadn't attained normative maturity, so we didn't comply with FHIR then, but with increasing OpenMRS support for FHIR, we decided to move towards FHIR compliance as well. So these are the parts of Bahmni that we want to migrate. The front end, we want to move towards a better, robust stack, and we also want to be FHIR compliant.
All right, so before we get into the AI-assisted journey, I just quickly want to show you the current experience of Bahmni. So right now, there are 4 key challenges that we were trying to solve. First one was the navigation. In most legacy systems, it's very unique in each screen. There is no consistent pattern. The second one is while entering data, so in something like this, where the consultation module is, you switch between tabs. So it takes almost about 8 clicks to do data entry. And when doctors are in low resource settings, especially with high volume patients, imagine 300 patients, 400 patients every day, this can be really time consuming. The third part is the data access. So as you see, when they click consultation, they are unable to see any of the patient data anymore. So access to data, patient data, should always be there no matter where they are in the interface. And lastly, the visuals. Of course, this was done 12 years back. So it's very flat hierarchy. There is nothing which emphasizes information. So it becomes really difficult to find. Now, how did we go about modernizing this UX, right? So there were 2 levels. And the first level is the most important one, where we set a broader direction to tackle some key challenges. So if you see now, you have a global navigation on top, you have a consistent navigation on the sides. Even when you open consultation, now you can also access patient data, and you have a navigation in consultation itself to navigate between items within. So once a broader direction is set, for example, in this case, we did a split screen approach. Then we go about picking slices. So allergy is one slice. If you take even below, there are more. So you'll have laboratory conditions. These are the slices we take one by one to modernize and make this modernization more possible. But what's most important is to ensure you have that broad direction. Otherwise, you can end up creating isolated experiences again.
So if you've worked with legacy systems before, one common thing that all of you will agree is that the minute you touch a working code, it will break. So that's something we've also faced. We kind of felt like these were the major challenges we had when doing this migration. So this is subjective. In our case, both of us have very limited domain expertise. So, healthcare being such a vast domain, having so much importance in what data is being captured, how it is being captured, domain expertise is very key. It is not something that you can learn in a day. The other part is to retain what is important. So, Bahmni, like I said, has been in use for the last 13 years. For the last 13 years, we've had great reviews from doctors who are using Bahmni. So it's not a system that has a lot of complaints against it. So there are parts of, which means there are parts of Bahmni which is superb, which we should retain. Identifying these is a key challenge because it's very easy to like scrap everything and then start afresh. So identifying what is good is always key. Then, like I said, Bahmni, 13 years, which means a huge code base. It's about 1 million lines of code. It is a very large, complex code base. No two ways about it. And finally, the core competencies. I think of myself as a generalist. I don't think of myself as a front-end developer. Doing a front-end migration, you need a front-end developer. You need a front-end expert. That's one competency I think I lacked, so did the team. And I think Pranjal considers herself to be a UX expert, not a UI expert. UI is also something that you need to be well aware in when you're doing this migration. So these were some core competencies that we lacked. I'm sure when you're doing some migration, you'll probably have some parts of it that you're not familiar with or you're kind of struggling with. And like Pranjal said, we decided to start small. We said we'll look at something small and then try this approach and then figure out our way around. So let's look at how we got started. And to get this started, like Pranjal said, we decided to focus on one sliceable piece. In our case, this display control, which is treatments. So what is a display control? In the context of Bahmni, display control is a widget you can configure, extend, or plug in anywhere in Bahmni. It has been built to like match to get some functionality done. Say these are all read-only. In your case, maybe you can think of it as a dashboard plugin. So that's what a widget is. I mean, a display control is. And there are about 30 such display controls. Like I said, it is modular, but that doesn't mean it is easy to handle. There is a display control in Bahmni which is called observations. None of the core team members know what is there in it. That is about 10,000 lines of code. So each display control is a project in itself. And for today's session, maybe we'll focus on, like I said, we'll focus on the treatment display control, which shows the prescriptions that are made against a patient by a doctor, against a number of configurable visits. Now, the key question is, where does AI come into all of this? So as part of this migration, we have come up with a workflow we have piloted for this migration called research, review, and rebuild. So 3 R's. This is what has helped us get the migration done. We are done with the clinical module. All of this thanks to this workflow. So now let's look at how this workflow is affecting the UX journey.
Okay, so maybe go next. All right. So first up, I've taken one of the display controls which Rahul mentioned, and I run a AI tool called AI Design Reviewer by Design Pro. This tool helps me see the positives and the negatives within this screen. Now, generally, to articulate experiences which are good and bad is one of the major challenges for stakeholders and sometimes also for designers. So, in legacy modernization especially, as Rahul was mentioning, to see the positives is difficult and something has been working for 3 years. So, we want to ensure we keep that. Secondly, the negative experiences which are highlighted, they also help me give a more goal-oriented design. So now I can redesign with more meaning and not just jump into ideation and say, okay, let's make it look good. So it goes beyond that and redesigning becomes more meaningful and it doesn't become just a lift and shift in a legacy. So that's the first part of the research. The second part is understanding users. Now, of course, these personas were crafted based on some user research, but in this plugin called QOQO, I give them a very brief description. For example, doctor, 35 years, 8 years of experiences, works in rural villages, handles about patients' volume as to 50, and needs to give detailed diagnosis to patients. So based on certain scenarios, with QOQ, it really helps us craft these personas. Again, that is something, if you've played any workshop with clients, building personas is the most difficult part. And with QOQ, we get a startup of what the challenges are, what the attitudes, the behavior of this persona could be. So here I can also chat with these AI personas. So here is where module by module, display control by display control, I can understand their goals and needs. Of course, in the next slide, you'll see we review all the insights that are derived from the expert review and by chatting with personas with our SMEs and sometimes end users if we have access to them. So here we look at what goes well in our context, what doesn't go well and may not make sense for our context. So these are good conversation starters, especially when you lack domain expertise. You can really extract rich information from your SMEs because they have been in this for 12 years, right? So they have knowledge which are in bits and pieces themselves. So for them also to stitch a whole picture for you to be painted, it's a bit difficult. So these gives you nice pointers and not just become a listener, but actually participate in conversation, challenge them as to what has happened in legacy so far. The third phase is the rebuild phase. So based on the insights derived from AI, from wetting stuff with the SMEs users, I then give a prompt to UX pilot. So this is where the goals come in, and I say, for medication, for example, I should be able to see past and active medications. Active medications is really important for doctors so that they get a one-shot view as to this is what I need to know in the patient. So I detail out a prompt in UX pilot. UX pilot helps me gives multiple options that can be generated, right? Now this, if I go to do by myself at this fidelity, especially when, as Rahul mentioned, I'm not a UI expert, it's not possible. It's not possible for me. So with AI, it really helps craft rich outputs, which otherwise were not possible. And also in legacy, most stakeholders, if you see, you will really have to navigate biases. They may be stuck to very familiar approaches, and this will help widen their horizons as well. So it's quick, it's fast, it's dirty. You can quickly do it and move on. See what you like from this, and in the end, the last part is where I retrieve this in Figma, which is the design tool I use, and then I create my own DIY design. So this is inspired, of course, from a bit of pieces here and there from AI, and then you put it in your context and redesign it how you think fit in your style. Which makes us go to the end. So, like I said, right, the broader vision is important. If you see, the first was the skeleton. And then piece by piece, we start modernizing this. The skeleton is the most important because it helps you stitch things together so that you don't end up recreating isolated experiences again. So to recap, this is the workflow that I have used in this modernization. You take a slice of legacy, you do a review with AI reviewer, AI design reviewer by Design Pro. I chat with AI personas to understand user needs by using QOQO. You make sure you have an intervention with SMEs or users. And then you use UX Pilot, give them some prompts, and make sure you generate a lot of ideas. Get inspired, and in the end, retrieve these designs in Figma and create your own. So lastly, you get a redesigned display control with AI insights, with SME inputs, and with user inputs. Now, maybe, yeah. So now I'll talk about 3 things which AI helped me with. First is the speed. Second, the depth. And third is richness. In the first one, faster delivery, right? If I was to do the redesign of that small piece also, it would at least take me a week. Because what happens is you gather inputs, you ideate, and then you deliver a high fidelity design. Now, in this process, when you're talking to SMEs extracting information, you get information also at bits and pieces. When you do the first interview, you'll get something. You never get everything one shot. When you show them a sketch, something else sparks. They're like, oh no, but we had to add this as well. When you show them a higher fidelity, you're like, oh, but we are missing this, let's add this, because that's when it comes to finalization and they're like, okay, no, we missed this. So you keep on going in this iterative loop, which is where the time to delivery also goes. So for me, with AI, I was able to do this in 3 days because first, I get inputs myself sitting with AI and figuring out the domain, figuring out what the users need, figuring out expert reviews, and going prepared to understand what I want to extract from SMEs. Ideations become faster with much higher quality, and then there's the delivery because now I can even retrieve it in Figma. I don't have to start ground up and get that level of quality. So for me, it was, and these numbers are very personal. So these are subjective to your expertise with AI, your expertise with design, and the complex solution you're probably working with. So for me, that's my speed, from 8 days to 3 days. The second part is the depth. And this is a really interesting one because especially with design, the more knowledge you get, the better you can make design decisions. If I was to do it just like that, I will, like I said, talk to subject matter experts, talk to users, which is also not a possibility every time. With AI, now let's say you just talk to Chat GPT, right? I can get the entire medical domain knowledge. I go one level deeper. I have a lot of historical data which is collected over 12 years. There's a lot of research done, user research, data collected, complaints. I can quickly ask AI to summarize it. I can retrieve what I want from that. Give this document and tell me who the personas were, tell me what the flow was. So you can actually make sense of historical data. The third level, like I said, was chatting with AI personas, and fourth was the expert reviews. So before, maybe it was just 2 touch points. Now I have 6, which is where I say it's 3x deeper understanding. And lastly, my favorite one is the richness of the outcome. I'll give you 3 examples. First is the UI design. As I said, it would have been impossible. I would probably have to do like a 4-year course to get the results that AI is giving. Second is prototyping. So with Figma, we were constrained by certain tools, which was Figma, for example, where prototyping can be done. But you will never get logic-based prototyping. When I take this for usability testing, I cannot ever ensure that the user can click anywhere and explore and give us feedback. Some clicks will be missing. So with low-code prototyping tools, and one of them which I used was Bolt, it really helps in doing usability testing. So this never existed pre-AI. But now, as a designer, I can use those tools to get there. And third, like I said, was personas. Personas in my career has been the biggest failure in any workshop. So with AI, the way it articulates things, it really helps in conversation starters, and it helps SMEs or any group you're talking to craft or paint a picture. Because now I can quickly give it some prompt. It can also create a nice visual of it. You can go through all the data points that have come about and verify with it. So verification is easier than starting ground up, which is why I say the richness of outcome is something I am unable to measure yet. All right, so not everything was rosy. There were some things which, they were glitches. So first one I would say is don't be a hammer looking for a nail. AI cannot solve everything. There are some things which you can do better. And I'll give you one example. When we started out to do the broader level vision, right? I just played along with AI and I was like, okay, I'll figure it out on the fly. And that took me 1 week because I went deeper into one idea. I did not explore more. AI was giving me same results, just like a little bit of layout options here and there. But there is nothing unique about each concept, which is where I said, okay, stop. I need to get back to my sketches. I spent 30 minutes and I drew literally boxed wireframes. And those, when I prompted AI, I got 5 unique ideas by sketching in 30 minutes. When prompted to AI, I got 5 clickable interactive prototypes, which I took to stakeholders within 2 days. And that is where we started making the design decision. Until then, we were just like, okay, exploring, exploring, exploring. So I would say, yeah, that's the first one. The second one is don't get carried away with AI. AI will throw you million beautiful options. Everything looks good. But like I said, right, it took me 3 weeks to get to a design direction. And each time, with every iteration, we were still questioning, oh, maybe we can do this better. Oh, this looks good. Maybe let's add this. But then that changes a lot of other things. So yeah, that's my 2 advice to you while using AI. These are something which you can totally overcome. So it's not like it's going to, but ensure that there are no delivery delays because of this, which did happen at one point of time.
So the next part of the puzzle is how AI is helping the developer journey, and let's look at how this workflow applies to the dev journey. In my case, this was my setup. So I had VS Code with Client, which is a coding agent installed on my machine as an extension, which connects to Anthropic's Claude models. We prefer the Sonnet ones, anything about 3.5. And we also had two MCP servers, one for Atlassian and the other one for file system. The Atlassian one basically gets us all the documentation that is already captured around Bahmni. So since it's an open source product, there are definitive documentation on most of the display controls, so that like that becomes a source of additional context for the rebuild. And then we have a file system MCP server, which basically is a volume mount. So I also wanted to look at the legacy code so that like I can rebuild stuff. So this is where the legacy code is volume mounted. So starting off, let's do the research first. I have my treatment display control. I have a detailed prompt, which is basically what any developer would look for. So starting off with any migration, you will be looking at the code base. You will be trying to figure out what is the data model like, how is the data coming in, how is it getting transformed, and how is it getting presented. So this is exactly what we have tried to capture with this prompt. There will definitely be some technical nuances based on your stack, based on your choice of frameworks. But I think this prompt in our case was reusable because, like I said, we have about 30 different display controls. For all the 30 display controls, this is the same thing that we wanted. So we spent about like, I think roughly 6 hours doing A/B testing, figuring out the right prompt. It took us about $10, and we came up with this prompt, which works every time for all the 30 different display controls. We prompt client to look at the older code base and figure out what this is. This gets me the detailed analysis, the first cut analysis. Basically, it tells me what the code base, that specific display control is like. A basic introduction, a file structure, what is the data model like. And the most important part here is that, like I said, so we also want to be FHIR compliant this time. Now, I want to look at the legacy model, data model, and then compare it with the FHIR data model. So these are two different things. If I'm to do this manually, it will ideally take me 2 days because there will definitely be some nuances I want to capture, and it will be a very, how do I put it, grunt work if I'm to do it manually. If I'm to do this with AI, the whole analysis took me about roughly 5 minutes. So the analysis ideally takes manually 2 days. Now it's just 5 minutes. Now comes in the research. So this is where my SME, my tech lead, or in my case, I could step in because I've been with Bahmni for 3 years. I understand these display controls. I come in, I look at the display control, and I say, okay, fine. These are good. Some parts of it, maybe let's do it later. And there will be some parts of it which is outdated. Probably the market doesn't demand these anymore. These were built long back, so it doesn't matter anymore. So those parts I'll remove. Whatever can be deferred later, those will also be removed. I'll take the first cut, I bring it down. So ideally we build everything iteratively, like we take the first iteration. This is for the first iteration, I basically shrink it down, retain whatever is relevant for the rebuild from the generated analysis. And finally, I have the rebuild. So this is some place where you need a style guide of sorts. It is always like if you worked with new people in your team, you always sit down with them for an hour and explain what the project structure is like, right? You explain what the project conventions are, how do you style things, what are the different things that you basically want to have in the code, and what are the different things that you don't want in the code. So this is basically that style guide for my display control. This is also some custom prompt we have written. Paired with this, I pass in the reviewed analysis and rebuild my first cut version of the display control. This took me another 5 minutes probably. Ideally, this is 3 days worth of work. The first cut is ready. Now I need to match it with whatever Pranjal gave me as a design specification. Now I do some refactoring. I sit down. Styling is something that AI is kind of struggling with. So I step in, I do the styling, and I get it aligned with whatever the initial design was. This is also something you can overcome. There is a Figma MCP plugin. You can use that to get Pranjal's design directly from Figma and then do the coding. But in our case, we thought we'll skip that part for now. So I step in, do the refactoring, and make it align with the design specification. So, like I said, you have one display control built now. Do it 30 times. You have the patient dashboard ready. So in our case, we had started off with the plan of rebuilding the consultation module, which is the module that the doctor interacts with. You step into a hospital, doctor looks at you and starts filling in forms, right? That's the part that we want to rebuild. We are done with it, I think, within 3 months, roughly. All of this with the help of this workflow. And this, the rough cut, the first cut version of this consultation module is the biggest part of the puzzle. So that's the biggest part of Bahmni. So we were able to do this in 3 months. And like any of you who have worked with softwares, you will know that the developers are the bottleneck. Development takes the most time, and you always estimate for the developer. In my case, ideally, like I said, 2 days of analysis and 3 days of rebuilding would have taken me like minimum of 3 to 4 days average. This is subjective. I take 3 to 4 days. Maybe you might do it in one day. But in my case, this was cut down to like 5 minutes of analysis, then 10 minutes of reviewing what was generated, another 5 minutes of regeneration, and then a 15-minute code review plus refactoring, which is roughly 45, 50 minutes, which is about 96 times faster than how I usually do it. So your dev bottleneck is cut down by 96 times faster delivery. And this is summary of what we just did. So basically, you look at the display control, you create your own tailored prompt to like analyze what the existing code is like. You review the generated analysis. You give it a style guide of sorts. Then you basically ask client to rebuild it for us. You might also be interested in what the cost was. So ideally, if I am to do this without any workflows, if I am to prompt it again and again and then vibe my way through this, it would have taken me more than $10. We tried that as well. So vibe coding our way through this display control would ideally take you $10 to $12 with partial success. The workflow costed us $2. So this was the cost difference. And with about 90 plus code coverage, we had like proper unit tests written. That was also part of the instruction that we had given in. So one piece of advice I always have is do pause before you proceed. This is super critical because if you're somebody who has worked with client before, you would know that there are two modes to client. There is a plan mode and there is an act mode. So in the plan mode, you basically talk to client. It's more like pair programming. You sit down, you talk to client and then figure out what do you want to do? How do you want to do? And then what is my end result like? You decide stuff, right? But in the act mode, you might suddenly be hit with a surprise. You'll be like, okay, fine. Why is this happening? And then you, right in the middle of the act mode, you then start prompting it again and then say, okay, don't do this. Do me something else. That's a problem. So what happens here is called context poisoning, wherein you're stuffing the context with more and more stuff on the top, and anything on the top is being considered more relevant. I can tie this to an example wherein I had a scenario where I wanted to test something end to end. It was a complex piece of test, and I wasn't sure how I would do it. So I was curious to know how client would do it. I saw the test passing. One of the prompts that I had was to make sure the test passed at the end. I was happy to see the test pass, and I looked at the test. This was the test. So it said, expect true to be true. I was surprised, like anybody would be, and then I asked client to like fix this test. Client was happy. It started fixing the test. Now it asked me whether I want to fix the rest of the test cases. I said, okay, do a review, look at other test cases. Now client has decided to like fix the test cases, not rebuild the display control. Now it's hard for me to like sit down and explain. No, no, no. This is not what I want from you. Don't look at the test cases. Even if I tell client to like stop and rethink, it will start looking at the test cases first. It will try to figure out, okay, this test is bad. This has like a lot of mocks in it. This is garbage. It will start calling out our developers. So that's not something I wanted. So this is something that you should also like keep in mind. Try not to poison your context. Always plan ahead, then act. And finally, a few key takeaways that we have. These are some lessons we've learned in our journey so far. Firstly, if you've seen this movie called Steve Jobs, which stars Michael Fassbender, there is a scene where Wozniak comes in and asks him, hey, I built the Mac, I built the entire system, you're the one who's famous. Somebody else designed the cube, but you're the one who's famous. All Fassbender says is, I am the orchestrator, you're an A-class musician. If you decide to be an A-class musician, problem is you're a horse with blinds. You look at whatever you want to solve, nothing else will fit in. Like Pranjal said, when designing in isolation, you don't have the wider context. Everything is just about that display control, which means one piece of the code will be super, the other one might not fit in. So be an orchestrator, not the musician. Secondly, like I said, don't interrupt. Plan ahead. There will definitely be some unknown unknowns. If you have the time, if you have enough patience, start over. That's always better. Gather all the context, gather whatever inputs you have, start over. It will definitely give you better results. Otherwise, it is going to be suboptimal. Don't be a hammer that looks for a nail. If you have a screw, look for a screwdriver, not a hammer. This is something that Pranjal also already covered, but in our case, for the developers, we had a bit of refactoring to do. Some files need to be moved to a different structure. We decided to like play an experiment. Part of the team was doing it vibe coding. Part of us was like, we'll do it manually. Manually, it took us 30 minutes to get the job done. With AI, it took them 8 hours. So this is where you take a call on like what to use AI for. Don't be a hammer. If you want a screwdriver, go for the screwdriver. And finally, never take your hands off the wheel. At this point, if you're building a production-ready enterprise application, never take your hands off the wheel. Tesla might assure you it can do a good job driving on its own. Tesla might even do it, but not AI at this point. You will have trouble in getting AI to like do the right thing all the time. So always make sure you're the captain of your ship. You make the calls. You say, this is what I want, and don't let everything that comes out of AI be the source of your truth. Have your own opinion, then use AI as a tool or a subordinate. Thanks. And this was not generated by AI.